Okay, I think we are recording. Yeah, okay. Hi, everybody. This is SIG Auth for December 3rd, 2017. We've got a pretty small agenda today, stuff about the multi-tenancy working group. Then I'd just like to call out some other PRs that probably need review early in the 110 cycle. So just in terms of first announcements, the code freeze is targeted to lift today. So that's awesome because we can start pushing more PRs through and getting all those merged. So fun stuff. I don't know I'm not totally up to date with if we're still on target for Friday, but hopefully the 1.9 will be out then. The other announcement we have is of the Kubernetes multi-tenancy working group. Jess, I think that you were the one who was going to take this.
Totally. Yeah, so we have a mailing list, which is in the Google Doc there. And there's only been like a few threads on there, and mostly it was about the talks that we gave at the deep dive at KubeCon, if you were there, but you can like catch up on all the slides because they're all on that list. So yeah, go ahead and join if you have like any thoughts on like how you're doing this at your company or like, or you're interested in it for the future, because we're just gonna like combine all our ideas and stuff.
I didn't know that most working groups sort of are time bounded, like they have a specific goal, and once they achieve that goal for whatever definition of that they generally sort of end. I was wondering with the multi-tenancy if there was a specific goal that this was targeting, or if this was sort of something we saw that was going to live on for a long time.
So I think that it might live on just in terms of like making sure that all features in the future can be used in a multi-tenant environment almost, but like as the core of Kubernetes whittles down, like we will probably just have some definitive way to do it for the like various definitions of multi-tenant that we're coming up with, like as far as like soft and hard, like inside one org, or like you're opening it up to the public, or you're creating like a SaaS, which we also are going to define all those things into terms that like we can use throughout in an understandable way. So yeah, I think it's just a lot of like documentation and stuff.
Yeah, the first round is like coming up with definitions, taking the things we already have and slotting them into like what do we already have at our disposal, identifying gaps, and then that's probably the first phase, and then like partitioning off what needs to be done, what are the gaps, and who's going to go work on those, or identifying those things.
Cool. So yeah, let me know if I need a more up-to-date link on that. I was looking in the community repo, but once you all open that PR and get a formal like landing page, then let us know and we can update the link.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that.
Cool. There are no demos today, so yeah, hopefully we can have some more future ones as people want to do that.
Just go watch all the videos from KubeCon when they get posted in the next week or so.
That's not an overwhelming amount or anything. But.
Yeah, right. Just all of them. There's 1,000 demos.
I like its demo. Moving on to this pulls of note, one is that actually that got brought up around some of the multi-tenancy stuff was a pull that is planned for 110 to add some of the network policy objects to user facing roles. So in RBAC, we have roles that are targeted for specific namespace users. So there's a view role, which is intended for users of a namespace that can only view objects. There's an edit role for users of a namespace that can deploy workloads. And there's also this admin role that can administer a namespace, is the way we like to advertise it. The network policy objects are being added to that. And I see that coming in, but there's around if an administrator wanted to say, set a global network policy. I don't think that those are going to get resolved. I don't have any specific plans to change network policy of this PR, but some of those discussions are probably worth looking at.
Yeah, just to give more context to this, I spent some time talking to Tim and Dan Winship on the network team. Originally, network policy was actually an ingress-only policy. So it was more like who is allowed to talk to me or to which pods. And then egress was more recently added. And the way it was described to me was that the intent was always to give the power to make those decisions to the application author. Like, so they could set up rules about, like, I'm going to set up the service, but only these specific CIDRs or these specific ingresses or egresses are allowed. And if we wanted a way for a cluster administrator to firewall off a namespace, that would be a different object, either like a cluster scoped object that, you know, a cluster administrator could maybe select namespaces and say, like, namespaces with these selectors can only talk to these locations or be reached from these locations. It would be a much more top-down type of configuration, and that is not what the current network policy was intended to be. So.
On to designs of note. So the biggest one here is probably the bounded service account tokens that Mike Denise opened up. There's been a lot of conversations through that. That's definitely worth looking at, but that's work that is intended for the 110 timeline.
And there's another half of that Mike and I, we were debating who was going to put the other part up, which would be how this fits into evolution of service account tokens on the node. I probably shared, Mike and I were going to put some things onto GDoc, and then he was going to try to write it up, but we might share that around before the end of the week. That I think that's maybe a little, that proposal might be a little aggressive for 110, but it gets to how you could bypass the built-in secrets part of this bounded proposal. So it's kind of like this is more focused on the token. There's another part which is more the mechanics in the Kubernetes system and how it might evolve.
Cool. Yeah, so for those who haven't been following this, the goals are, there are kind of three main goals around this. The first is to remove the need for service account tokens to be in API objects. And that is for security reasons, so that they're not easily visible, scrapable, and also just for performance reasons, so that on large clusters you don't have huge numbers of static tokens, each with a CA bundle sitting in your etcd. So that's the first motivation. The second is to let the tokens be bound or attenuated in a lot of different ways. So to a specific audience, or to a specific node, or to a specific pod, and then also lifetime limited. And then the third motivation behind this particular proposal is to give, to make it an API so that actors like kubelets can provision these on demand for a particular pod. So those are the three motivations. Each of those has value kind of independently, but if we can get all three of those to happen, that'll be really great, actually.
Awesome. The next item is, for the proposals at least, is the self-hosted Webhook Authorizer. This, right now, when you configure an API server and say, point to an external authorizer to handle things that RBAC doesn't, you have to, it's not possible to run that on the pod network just because of sort of the way that the API server reaches out. So this is a proposal to let you be able to actually run those authorizers in the cluster and have the API server consult something through the pod network. I put this on here because I don't think that I personally had any more comments, and just wanted to expose visibility for, particularly around people who are involved in API machinery who might have better understanding of sort of what the concerns were with the original PR.
And to be clear, this is a solution to that problem is proposed?
Yeah, this would let you reference a service running in the cluster when saying, I want to reach out to an external webhook. And this proposal tries to solve that.
Yeah, you could sort of do that today if you are running things on your master machines that let them recognize like service DNS names, but that's not universally done or even necessarily widely done. And so you sort of got into chicken and egg scenarios where you couldn't really express the configuration to tell it where to look until you had brought up the server and spun up some services and knew what their IP addresses were. And so this is looking to expand the configuration for the authorization webhook to be able to let you explicitly say, I want you to use this service. And while we are at it, there are a couple other configuration options, like letting you specify what should happen if a webhook authorizer fails. Like, should it continue on to the next authorizer or should it hard fail? That was something that a feature that came in the 1.9 timeframe that we want to make configurable. And then finally, what version of the subject access review API objects should be sent and received. When the webhook was first introduced, we were still on V1 Beta 1. And now that those are promoted to V1, it would be nice to let people opt in to say, yep, I can use the V1 format. Please send that to me. So we're just kind of fleshing out the configurable pieces, and then as part of that, letting you explicitly tell the API server to talk to a service instead of just an arbitrary URL.
I've added a new section for this particular meeting under a needs review. So these are just PRs that are sitting around. They don't have any particular outstanding concerns, but we probably want to go and review them and get them moving again. There was a lot of interest in the KMS gRPC plugin, allowing you to specify an external service to do the encryption at rest. So this would allow people to hook up the encryption at rest mechanisms to use keys from Vault or use encryption services like Google KMS or AWS KMS. This one still has some outstanding concerns just around, is the gRPC format okay? Do we need to do a different webhook mechanism? Based off of all the work that has been done on this and sort of this kind of unpleasant experience of having to tell people, sorry, we're doing something different now, so all that work you did isn't getting in. We definitely want to target this for 110, and any eyes on that to get it moving would be appreciated.
Yeah, I think the first step is just closing with the SIG architecture on use of gRPC here. And from the conversations I had last week, I didn't hear any strong objections, but I think the first step is just closing that and getting that approved.
Yeah, I don't think we really got into the nitty-gritty of the deep details. It was more like side conversations, so it might need to go on like an agenda just to double check. It seems like there's consensus, but we need to survey the crowd, as it were.
Yeah.
Who's taking that, checking with SIG architecture, et cetera?
No one yet. So one thing that became very clear with some of the conversations is that a lot of the people working on this are very motivated to get it in, but aren't particularly familiar with the SIG process, or don't show up to SIG Auth every time, or understand what SIG architecture is. So as we have those discussions, we should probably be updating that issue and just saying, by the way, someone needs to go to SIG architecture and have this discussion.
Could someone, though, volunteer for this particular issue? Who feels comfortable? not me.
I'm happy to do that if there's a SIG architecture meeting this week. Otherwise, I'm out for the holiday. I need to look at the calendar and see when the next one is.
Yeah, I think anything we talk about right now is like not expected to happen until like a month or whatever.
Yeah.
Sorry, is the idea then that all plugin models can, or all plugins can follow either model, or is it only certain models on gRPC and others on REST?
So the question is, for the various extension points we have REST ones for like the webhooks. We have gRPC ones for things like CNI, CRI. And the question is, for each new extension point, which model makes more sense? What are the principles we're using to decide which makes sense? And we should settle on how we make that decision. So this question is easier to answer the next time. So this is the first thing from the API server that is sort of a downward-facing extension point, not an outward-facing extension point. So the storage layer is completely encapsulated by the API server that's not exposed to anyone else. And so this is an aspect of the storage layer. And we're trying to figure out, given the call pattern and the performance goals and where we expect it to be surfaced, does gRPC make sense?
Yeah, so I'm slightly biased because I work at Google, but we have a translation layer between what is essentially gRPC and the rest. So that might make sense for SIG architecture as well to offer that. Then you can do your plugin in either way, and it can be consumed either way, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, we're relatively close to that if we ever get the protobuf stuff working with Webhook external webhooks. So
yeah, right. It's essentially translating the protobuf values and a little bit of hooking up of gRPC endpoints to REST endpoints.
It looks like SIG architecture is due for a meeting tomorrow, but I don't see an agenda, so they might have canceled for this week. I will ask.
Awesome. Thanks for taking that up and just bugging them about that. The next one is the rules review API stuff. So rules review is one of these sort of non-persisted APIs, as Jordan corrected me on. And what it does is it allows you to query the authorization layer and say, what are all the bulk actions that a particular user can perform? We expect that to be very helpful for people building dashboards or something like that, because you can perform a bulk action and say, what are the things that this person can act on in this namespace, and then hide particular like edit cogs based off of that information. That I would appreciate if anybody could take a look at that. Maybe even after the holidays, because it's not particularly urgent. But this is one that didn't get into 1.9, so it'd be great if we could get it into 1.10. And that's it for our written agenda. Does anybody have anything they want to discuss or specific things that weren't on here? Should we call it early?
As far as the needs review thing, another thing that I'm planning to work on in 1.10 is the node restriction stuff around taints and labels. So if you have thoughts on that, I'll put that in the needs review section again. Otherwise, I think we will probably start putting some concrete steps in place and see if we can make progress to get that locked down in 1.10. That was, yep, 911, appropriately.
Yes. I'll clean that up in a second. Awesome. So I imagine that SIG Auth will be a little bit more it would be a little less regular with the holidays showing up. So I haven't looked at the calendar yet, but I imagine the next time we'll be meeting is in January. So just a heads up for anybody wanting to know where we are.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining. This is a short one, so we'll go ahead and give you back 30 minutes. And happy holidays. And catch you online.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.